Yes, yeah, we can hear you in the room, so that's great.
Perfect. So thank you, Emma, for the nice introduction. Graffiti can be carved on any type of surface. However, due to the chance of survival, most graffiti are known on stone surfaces, such as stone walls, slate, plaster, or rock. Very seldom, carvings on glass can also be observed. My presentation deals with 3 different questions. First, we will ask what conditions must be met for graffiti on glass to be handed down. Secondly, how uses glass to scratch graffiti on it? Who? And thirdly, what types of glass are used for graffiti? It has to be stressed that as a very hard material, glass is very difficult to work with, which is why its use as a writing medium is not so obvious. My presentation offers glass as a writing medium, then suggestions of categories for graffiti on glass, graffiti on tankards, the castle RIEGERSBURG in Austria, an old inn in Herborn, the Shakespeare birthroom in Stratford-upon-Avon, some royal scratching places or palaces, and last but not least, artist graffiti taggers. In contrast to graffiti on glass, the development of graffiti on glass is limited by other factors. Firstly, the material glass must be available in larger quantities. In Europe, bullseye glass and other types of glass windows did not spread roughly until the early modern period. Secondly, graffiti scratched in glass are much rarer, however, because glass is a more fragile writing medium and is replaced more quickly. And in addition, the application of graffiti on glass requires special diamond-based tools, mainly pens. This makes them so rare. The conservative estimate by Matthew Champion, who will speak later today, is about 0.001%, or even less compared to other writing medias like walls or rocks. For my presentation, I propose the following categories into which graffiti on glass can be classified. Mark of craftsman, of course, the craftsman who has done the window, the replacement or supplement of a guest book, or for guest books in general, the encouraging for guests, for later visitors, or a substitute for notes or messages or memories. So now let's see some examples. You see here a high, thick-walled cylindrical tankard with a capacity of 3 liters, which is more than 5 pints. Between 1580 and 1587, mainly members of the nobility carved a total of 106 entries on the wall of the glass with the help of a diamond pen. The individual entries were separated from each other by frame lines. The majority of the inscriptions are arranged according to a uniform pattern. In the first line, the year, between the second and third digit, of which a letter or pictorial symbol is often inserted. In the second line, a motto, usually abbreviated with initials. And finally, below this, the name with 1 or more lines. The glass tankard apparently served as a welcome to the guests invited to the hunt. Since his entries begin in 1580, a direct connection with the acquisition of a more artful new trophy can be assumed, which was commissioned in that very year and then put also into use in the following year. During the transitional period, until the new trophy was delivered, the simple tankard probably served both as a drinking vessel that the guest had to empty and as an inscription medium on which they had subsequently immortalized with their names and motto. After the new trophy was put into use, the tankard probably became obsolete as an actual drinker's welcome, but it continued to be used for inscriptions until 1587, when the walls of the vessels no longer offered any free space for further inscriptions. But people could also inscribe their names in a guest book created in August 1581, which finally took over this task in 1587. So here we have an addition to a guest book. Just to show you that there are many more examples of glasses with graffiti carvings, here are some examples from the castle Ambras in Austria next to Innsbruck. The oldest known drinking glasses with graffiti-like inscriptions date back actually to the antiquity. But there's also the observation that in the 19th century, Roman glasses were subsequently provided with graffiti. So this is a big problem for the next future. At RIEGERSBURG Castle in Styria, windows with original bull's-eye panels on which inscriptions were later carved have been preserved in the so-called Knight's Hall at the north side. The extension of the castle was commissioned around 1600 by Baron von Stadel and his wife. Ownership of the castle passed into other hands in 1618, the beginning of the 30 Years' War. And one of the graffiti of the glass panels tells us of a 3-week banquet in 1638 during the 30 Years' War. As far as I know, this is the oldest graffiti on glass that can still be seen in its original location. So if you have hints, in the end, I hope the public. Excessive celebrations seem to have seduced the challenge of engraving a graffiti in glass. A very nice example was brought to my attention by a friend who's also listening today. Surprisingly, some windows of a former restaurant in the German countryside of Herborn have survived. These contain nearly 20 individual panels, and on at least half of them, there are graffiti. The oldest dates from 1763. Future evaluation will certainly tell us not only about the drinking culture of the students here, but also their language skills, because they scratched in Latin and French. This brings us to the birthplace of William Shakespeare on Henley Street in Stratford-upon-Avon. This has long been a destination for visitors who also use the surfaces of the building to document their presence. There are many graffiti at the walls of this house. This tradition began in 1769 when the well-known actor David Garrick organized the first Shakespeare Festival. Later, famous visitors were encouraged to carve their names on the wall. Sir Walter Scott in 1821, Charles Dickens in 1838, or Mark Twain in 1873, to name just a few. Around 1800, a new window was installed in Shakespeare's birthroom, and this is the one we can see here. In 1806, the first visitor carved their name into this window. To do this, he had to open the left, this one, I don't know if you can see, the left window sash and carved into the glass from the outside. As a special feature, he carved his name and date upside down on the panels. This way of carving the graffiti changed in the 1820s. From then on, the names were carved directly into the glass from the inside and not upside down anymore. Here too, visitors might have been encouraged to carve their graffiti in order to be able to show new attractions to later visitors. Since I photographed all the 60 panels this summer, I was able to create a first transcription. The following results can be noted here so far. In total, 846 individual graffiti can be counted. The first graffiti on the glass dates from 1806 and the latest from 1968. The 20 oldest are upside down and from outside. About 20% of the graffiti were scratched by women. Some visitors also left their places of origin. The most frequently mentioned are Ludlow 3 times, London 4 times, Philadelphia 3 times, and New York 12 times. The German countryside Hessen is home to Wolfsgarten Palace, which was built in the 1720s by order of Landgraf Ernst Ludwig. A famous guest of the complex was Prince Philip, the husband of Queen Elizabeth II, who visited his German relatives here. In one of the rooms, there is a glass panel on which names and dates have been repeatedly carved. The graffiti were scratched by 6 different people who gave their names and the year of their stay, and in 3 cases, even the date. The members of the royal family were Prince Philip, who immortalized himself 28 times. Furthermore, Prince Charles was 4 times, Prince Anne was 3 times, and other ones each. Among the list of state visits Queen Elizabeth II made, there is one to West Germany in May 1965. And on the 3rd date of this visit, she left her graffito at Wolfsgarten Palace. Since in this extremely rare case, the real persons who carved the graffiti are known, their autographs can be compared here with their engraved names, which provides an insight into how the material of the writing medium influences the form of the writing. There's another order window in this castle, of which I have unfortunately not yet found a picture, on which some members of the Russian Tsar family carved themselves at the turn of the century when they visited their relatives in Wolfsgarten in Hessen. The castle thus forms an important link between the royal families in Russia, England, and Hessen, as well as other Scandinavian royal relatives. The windows in Fredensborg Castle in Denmark are signed by many of the castle's guests. The practice of inscribing one's own name and possibly a date or short text or poem began in 1841, when Louise of Hesse carved her names into one of the panels. From the 1816s onwards, it became a regular custom. In 2013, 240 windows with inscriptions were known to exist in Fredensborg. Most of them are in the garden room, the lighthouse room, and various bedrooms. Many panels have more than one signature engraved on them, so it is estimated that there are more than 700 signatures in total on these panels. In addition to members of the Danish royal family, famous guests were also encouraged to inscribe their names. Winston Churchill, for example, in 1950. In the past, the inscriptions were engraved directly into the window. Since 2013, the signatures have been engraved, you can see this here on the pictures, have been engraved in a loose glass plate, and Queen Margaret II chooses the location in the palace window. The Tsar's family also had a preference for this particular kind of graffiti. They liked to scratch sayings or dates into the window of their residences with diamond pens. One of these graffiti has been preserved in the Hermitage to this day. I haven't yet an answer from the Hermitage, you know, the problems with Russia today, so still waiting. Tsarina Alexandra Fyodorovna, wife of Tsar Nicholas II, wrote on the glass of a window in the Winter Palace, you can see the quote here, Nikki 1902, looking at the Hussars 7th March. The inscription was written in English because this was the mother tongue of the Russian Tsarina. She was a granddaughter of Queen Victoria. The common feature of royal graffiti is that they are barely visible to the public. Now follow some examples of artists and scholars who, like many others, basically carved graffiti on walls, but from whom graffiti on glass also still survives. A surprising amount is known about Robert Burns' references to graffiti, especially on glass. Robert Burns, considered one of Scotland's national poets, along with Walter Scott, meet James Cunningham, the Earl of Glencairn, in Edinburgh in 1786. The Earl not only welcomed the poet warmly into his home, but gave him a diamond pen as a present. Burns used this gift to carve his signature, epigrams, and other text into many window panels and glasses. Some of his diamond pen engravings have survived, but others are disputed as to their authenticity. One such pen of glass bearing Robert Burns' signature is still preserved in the National Museum of Scotland, but it's not too significant. The surviving pen consists of a cylindrical piece of wood with a diamond set into a metal extension at one end, and is now in the collection of Roselle House galleries. Surprisingly to me, there is a very detailed article about Burns as a graffiti tagger in the English Wikipedia. Now for two other examples. In the Gothic house, which Leopold III, Prince of Anhalt-Dessau, had built in the Park of Wörlitz by 1773, he collected important works of art from the Middle Ages. Among other things, he had some windows decorated with precious stained glass from the 15th to the 16th centuries, which he had purchased in Switzerland. One agent of such windows was the Swiss preacher and scholar Johann Caspar LAVATER. LAVATER visited the prince in Wörlitz in 1786, and on that occasion he carved an inscription exactly in the center of the window front on the central pane of glass. In 1794, Adolf Freiherr Knigge, a famous behavior instructor in Germany, expressed his indignation about LAVATER's habit of leaving sayings and poems on the walls of inns and churches. In Flensburg, there is the so-called Eckner house, which contains a glass graffiti by the painter Emil Nolde. Ada Wilstrup, later the wife of Emil Nolde, lived in the house for a time as a subtenant. Emil Nolde is said to have visited Ada here several times and to have carved his name Nolde on a window panel. The names of other relatives, Ernst and Ina, are found further down. Nolde's autographs show a similar appearance. And even the artist's graffitis are only accessible to an invited circle. Now we come to the summary. When the book The Merry Swords appeared in 1731, it contains 97 graffitis on glass and was widely reprinted, it encouraged the reapplication of glass engravings. The majority of graffiti in England that survives in the original form dates from after this year, from after 1940s. My impressions of the graffiti on glass is so far that there is very little pre-1730 glass left in the original locations. Currently, I only know of the example on RIEGERSBURG Castle from the beginning of the 17th century, but there are still original 15th century stained glass panels with graffiti from a monastery in Freiburg. You can see them here in the upper right corner. But these are preserved in museums and not in its original location. Graffiti on glass is not only a very rare phenomenon, but also very rarely studied. Years ago, Banksy's spray paintings on walls was considered as vandalism. Today, every new work from him is celebrated by the world. But what has probably never been seen before is a graffiti by Banksy carved into glass. So hopefully he is listening today, and thank you very much for your attention.